Hello, hi. So welcome to this webinar from Livingstone. My name's Chris Goff. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of the Livingstone Group. And today I'm going to take you through our 5-stage blueprint for software lifecycle management transformation. So I'll start by kind of giving you a bit of background on why a 5-stage blueprint. So this is something that we've developed in our organisation really because of a number of main factors. The first one mainly is that the risk landscape for software lifecycle management is changing for a number of reasons. Primarily, it's the move from CapEx to OpEx expenditure on software, really materialising mainly through cloud services, but also through general changes to perpetual models moving to subscription models. Clearly, this has quite a major implication rather than the historic bill of materials approach where you would buy some hardware, buy some software, put it in your data center and not worry about it until perhaps you changed its use. Now this is a proactive consuming platform which is consuming money all the time. So on that basis, that risk is very much as looking forwards based on bad behaviour in the past, and clearly that's creating a major landscape change for risk. The other thing is that in that scenario, of course, that a reactive approach to risk is no longer fit for purpose. The rearview mirror approach of asset audits, license audits and risk mitigation isn't good enough to manage costs in a future OpEx-driven model. So proactiveness is the key word, and clearly an approach or a coherent target operating model is required to meet those demands. And as we go into that OpEx world of cloud and subscription spend, so the realm of license compliance in cloud also changes. It is getting more complex. What you thought you could use on-premise is not necessarily the case of what you can use in the cloud. And, the industry is littered with examples of customers caught short by major assumptions made on what they bought in the past being usable in platforms for the future. And underpinning that, of course, is the fact that people don't know what they don't know. So understanding that dynamics of licensing and subscription takes some time to get your head around, and it's especially painful if you've made a number of mistakes to get that knowledge. And so clearly customers are looking for support and a shortcut to expertise to better understand that whole dynamic of licensing and subscription. Tools alone cannot deliver the outcome. So they contribute to one dimension of the equation and can't deliver the outcome. Importantly, they also require expertise and embedded process to drive the outcome of the data they provide. And in a proactive requirement, that means it's something that has to be proactively delivered. And especially where reducing and avoiding costs requires proactiveness, not least because the realm of uncontrolled cost leakage is getting wider with things like marketplace. So customers are finding that they need to have a more comprehensive framework to put control where previously some element of cost control might be done through procurement and sourcing and can't be controlled through the advent of cloud-based marketplaces. And lastly, IT is being seen and compared importantly as a service provider. So certainly if you're a large enterprise where IT is a shared service and many of your budget holders are business units or other parts of your organization, so the scrutiny of service is becoming, and that lens of scrutiny is becoming ever more looked at. And clearly there is a major pressure on CIOs and IT leaders to deliver and demonstrate and account for cost of IT at a service level. And going forwards, when OpEx is judged against capability and service, there will be more scrutiny and accountability required in terms of your ability to demonstrate value. And so, all in all, this is driving the need for a far more comprehensive approach to software lifecycle management, and hence why we've built and delivered this blueprint. So what is the blueprint? Well, the blueprint is actually a very simple 5-stage process for you in your organisation to start putting together a coherent plan for software lifecycle management. It importantly covers 5 steps. Those 5 steps are step 1, which is defining your strategic objectives. Step 2 is understanding the landscape. Step 3, identifying the target operating model. Step 4, the transformation approach to software lifecycle management. And step 5 is being clear about your business case. So we've designed this. It's actually an A1 size document, double-sided, and it's it'll fit on a flip chart, and you can use this as an aid memoir to running a workshop. Use it to take a logical approach to defining your SLM strategy, and importantly, sharing a vision with your peers and your leadership on what good looks like and what that business case is at the end to make it happen. So we're going to start with running through each of the stages, and in this part of this discussion, I'm going to go through in terms of really the scope of the stage and what it is, and also just talk about who we recommend should be there, the time frames to complete, and obviously the output that you should expect to produce at the end of it. Hopefully it will provide a bit more clarity for you in the approach to the blueprint workshop that you could take. So we're going to start with stage 1, defining your strategic objectives. Really, this is to get a coherent and clear view within your organisation, especially with your leadership, about the strategic objectives for software lifecycle management, and importantly, take some time to understand not only do we need to define our objective, but also we need to be clear about who needs to be part of it, who are the key stakeholders in those objectives, and how do you might need to organise yourself to make sure that the benefits of the programme are continually reviewed with those individuals to demonstrate value and return. We split the objectives themselves into 3 key areas: commercial, which are the financially related outcomes that you're trying to achieve; operational, the operational governance and outcomes that you want through better working practice; and lastly, technical, which is around really helping you drive better standards in your organisation, and also look at areas such as security as a benefactor of the strategic approach. Participants to take part, well, one key one to start with is obviously your exec sponsor. Like any strategic program, I mean, take security as an example, having someone senior who will be your sponsor, who will communicate the business level messaging, align key stakeholders, and get the right messages to the parts of the organisation you need is absolutely key, and they absolutely should be part of this process. The software lifecycle management stakeholders themselves, and these will be people who take ownership of lifecycle management, and they may include people like your software asset management team or compliance people, anyone really concerned with the governance of SLM. Vendor management, category management, and procurement. So those individuals who, as a byproduct of the BI that SLM provides and the efficiencies that SLM provides and the risk management that SLM provides, will go and negotiate some great outcomes commercially with your software publishers and vendors. So they're absolutely participants. And lastly, IT management. So those individuals responsible for the operational and technical side of software and cloud service deployment, where clearly they need to be involved with that whole Time frame, we've given you a guide here, 1 to 2 hours. Output is really just a list of strategic objectives, but importantly with clear business cases stated, owners and success criteria. It's really important. So we've defined what good looks like in terms of outcome, but how are we going to measure that? How are we going to prove that the SLM program is fit for purpose? When you get the blueprint, and I should say, by the way, that there is a new edition that's being released for this webinar. So if you've got an edition that you maybe have seen before, perhaps from somewhere like Gartner, we have a new version to download, so please do download it off our website. You can go through the detail that's in the blueprint itself. So back to the stage 1 for a second and defining the strategic objectives. The 3 areas, commercial, operational and technical, I discussed, break down as follows. So we have spend optimization, cost management, risk mitigation, the 3 key commercial outcomes that 90% of our customers align to. And then some suggestions really for operational technical objectives. So lifecycle change in culture potentially is an operational objective, and technically strategy, best practice and security. Now, operationally, we're trying to drive better practice and more accountability and better behaviours when it comes to people understanding the consequence of commercial decisions involving software and cloud. Technically, it's trying to make sure that when we set a technical standard for the deployment of software and cloud, where there is a risk attached to it, that we're hoping our SLM program will help mitigate, the organisation sets those standards and adopts best practice, and obviously also helping fix issues such as security along the way. So that's stage 1. Stage 2, current and future SLM landscape. So having defined our strategic objectives and being clear about what good looks like and the success criteria that sits around it, now we want to move to understanding where we are today and what our future SLM landscape needs to look like. We split this into effectively 3 areas, which are trustworthy data, lifecycle process and optimization. Just for information, these 3 areas are actually aligned to the ISO standard, 19770 standard. And the reason we've done that is clearly for 2. One is, a lot of work has gone into that to say, well, this is what organisations should be doing as an attainable standard in terms of demonstrating what good looks like from an ISO perspective. It also helps put credence, credibility into the program for you with your peers and leadership, but also it defines the deliverables that you need at the key 3 areas, which is trustworthy data, lifecycle process, and optimization. And so by breaking it down into those 3 areas and understanding that logical connectivity and connection between them, you're able to break down your architecture of SLM and define what good looks like by understanding those 3 key deliverable areas. Going back to who should be part of this in stage 2, participants. Again, we're now talking kind of a lower level than the exec sponsorship of the SLM program, but these are against key stakeholders around the commercial sourcing procurement side, the governance side, and you may also want to bring in parts of the organisation where software is still bought and managed. So typically line of business could sit in here, where line of business own their own budgeting, may even be making their own software selections because they have a direct revenue attachment or a service attachment, depending on what line of business does, and therefore line of business clearly are net buyers of service and software. But importantly, when we're looking at an SLM current and future landscape, how do they do it? Are they successful? Did they make a poor job of it? Are they achieving any outcomes? And do they want to get something from this program? So yeah, a great audience to invite. And lastly, of course, the key SLM team itself, those people who are responsible directly for the delivery of SLM. We've put this down to kind of a day, depending on the size and complexity of the organisation, it might be more. And the output here is a shared view of where are we today. And this is by far, as a stage, probably the most investigative, I guess, if that's a good word to use, in terms of what you need to find out about where you are in terms of trustworthy data process and optimization. So let's move on to the second part of that stage, which is the actual detail. And when you look through the blueprint, you'll see various different parts to it, which cover various different things. So we'll start with the first one, which is trustworthy data. And this is really an assessment of data and tooling. And actually, business intelligence, if we want to use that term, is going to drive a lot of strategic decisions. Poor data, poor BI, can mean poor decisions. And so our objective is to get to trustworthy data where key decision makers and stakeholders go, that's the BI I have, I trust it, I'll base my decision on it. And so this piece of analysis for trustworthy data that you see here will help you better build that holistic picture of how you need to collect data, how you need to normalize, reconcile it, and how you need to produce meaningful BI. And of course, a lot of that will hopefully use investments you may have already made, but it also will help indicate what your gaps are if you need to make specific investments in terms of software asset management tooling or any other platforms of the like. So very quickly looking at that, there are all sorts of aspects of trustworthy data, and we can talk everything from the ability to discover software in your environment across a multitude of platforms, and we listed some well-known tools there, which may cover maybe more client-side or data center-centric, maybe vendor-centric, like IBM's INMT tool, specific for capacity measurement. Of course, there's a wider raft of other tooling and data sources, which may include cloud and other data-centric platforms. So what this will do is give you hopefully the bare bones of an approach to take in terms of doing that assessment. And it will go round, or you can go round that diagram and start to explore with your peers exactly what good looks like in it from a data and technology standpoint. We've also given a little indication on there as well, you'll notice, about potential resources and skills that you'll need to do that. The next part of that is the lifecycle process side. Aligned to ISO, you'll notice there's 6 boxes from acquisition all the way around that wheel to retirement. Clearly that needs to be aligned ideally with the process in your organisation, and importantly to understand the contribution of SLM in terms of value, again BI, to that landscape. Obviously there's a data contribution, but also there's the process itself, and how is that going to be delivered, who is going to deliver it, what is the outcome that that process is set to deliver. So we've not put a lot of detail in the processes themselves, but in terms of the areas that should cover are those 6 areas as I discussed. Again, we've given an indication of resources and skills that you may need to consider in doing that. Again, as part of stage 2, we then move on to optimization. And you'll notice, if you, again, are familiar with the ISO standard, this is all related directly to the ISO standard. And it's interesting getting your head around how the ISO standard has presented what optimization looks like. And for many people, it's a slightly wider context than perhaps they first thought. The 4 areas are relationship and contract management, financial management, service level management, and risk management. And taking a step back in terms of the data, again, and the outcomes that SLM through process and expertise should deliver, clearly the optimization opportunity, when you understand how that data might be used constructively and as trustworthy data with supporting process, you clearly can start to identify how those 4 areas can be positively impacted by the SLM side of things. So, relationship and contract management, certainly in a world where we're going more all in, absolutely a focus on maintaining control and your ability to manage contracts against what you've negotiated. And from our perspective, it's really important when you consider that you may be going more all in with vendors, certainly in their user productivity stroke cloud services, but also with other vendors, and you may think of some major vendors around all sorts of business applications, but very often you're now making a 10 or 15 year technology stroke platform strategy, because that's what these will be, but of course often only consider it on a 2 to 3 year contracted basis. So with that lens in mind, you start to understand, well, how do I take relationship and contract management control, but also the facets of financial management, service level management, and risk management also suddenly become painfully clear. And having a business-led approach to those 4 areas of optimization will help you deliver more meaningful business value and actually deliver the true commercial outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. The last bit of stage 2 is really just, 2 areas actually. The first bit is we've just provided you with some simple tables to just capture some data. So we're giving you 3 examples: mapping strategic vendors, which is, from a vendor standpoint or publisher standpoint, what products do I buy? How are they licensed or subscribed? What's my data to manage those and measure those? And what other data do I need to properly manage the contract? So we've given some examples of Microsoft and Oracle in this. You can clearly adapt that how you need to the vendors that you need. Important though that you take a holistic view of it, because typically in the SLM, you'll spend 50% of your time doing the first 80% of that assessment, and as you get to very much more obscure products and measurement requirements, then you'll find that the last 20% could equally incorporate 50% of your time. So really good to get a very simple but clear way of defining what those requirements are, so that you can then move forward with your target operating model. What we've also done on the 2 tables below, one is map existing tool capability. So we've got some discovery examples here with products like SECM, ADDM, ILMT, looking at what platforms they support, the vendors they discover, the metrics they support, and actually what the coverage is. And often that exercise actually helps you identify what you don't have rather than what you have. And certainly where you're looking at metrics at what we class as non-instance metrics, business-led metrics, which might be financially related or line of business related. It helps you understand, well, if we're going to manage consumption around those metrics, how do we collect that data? How do we make it available? And the last one really there is the mapping process and stakeholders. So, what are the key processes that we have to support that life cycle when we're looking at SLM in a more integrated life cycle sense, and what process do we have? And really getting a view of not process, but actually what is the data we need to support that process? How do we make sure that process is delivered meaningfully with the outcomes expected? Final part of the second stage is just a resources and skills matrix. So again, a summary of what we think skills ought to be. And that really helps you plan then, in your future target operating model, how am I going to bring this capability together? Which bits of those perhaps do I want to resource myself? Which bits of those am I going to look for some potential external assistance or another methodology of covering that skills gap? Let's move on to stage 3. So this is what we call target operating model. This is getting to a model of how am I going to deliver this capability. And importantly, what we're trying to do here is, again, align to our ISO aligned 3 tiers of trustworthy data lifecycle optimization. To actually have a common view of what good looks like. For this section, again, participants really similar to the previous one. Time frame 1 to 2 hours to finalise your model. We've given you a good example here of what that model looks like. By the way, what I'm going to show you here is like different to what's on the blueprint, but this will give you a bit more context, and the blueprint will give you some more exacting requirements for the target operating model. About 1 to 2 hours to finalise it. Output is really a common, a picture of what good looks like. So let's go into that detail now. So what we've done here is we've actually given you in the blueprint effectively a 3x3 target operating model. So you'll notice that the 3 tiers are represented: trustworthy data, lifecycle, integration, optimization. And what we've tried to give you a view of are what we think the key facets are of what good looks like in terms of capability. Now, typically, you will look at this and go, well, I need to prioritize some of this. And some of this is quite obvious in my organization where this sits, but other bits may not be. And actually, some of it I may not want to do at all. So that's really at your discretion. Importantly, though, in this target operating model that we've provided as a framework for you, you can agree importantly what the deliverables of the tiers are and the actual components of those tiers to deliver outcome. So I'm going to run through those pretty quickly here, and we can discuss them in slightly more depth. So we've got enterprise data management, which is global asset and cloud services reporting, providing centralized key business metrics on hardware and software usage, cloud usage, user consumption, asset security, maintenance state, rationalization opportunity, and strategic risks. Quite a lot. What we're saying there really is that when we talk to customers about enterprise asset data, what we find is that the audience is growing for it. And so some customers are now going, well, actually, I need a strategy for this data because I've got more consumers of this data, more people and more systems want it. I need to bring it into a holistic enterprise data management type solution. So you need to have a view of this as a capability, and this is a capability of enterprise data management before you move to one of the facets we really focus on a lot in SLM, which is things like compliance and cloud consumption. It's that enterprise architecture, and importantly, can SLM deliver better and best value to a number of stakeholders in our organisation? And there you see some enterprise data management. Alongside that, in terms of the tier of trustworthy data, we then have compliance reporting itself, and this really focuses on the production of effective license positions, really to ward off the impact of vendor audits. And often you will take a prioritised view of that, or you may decide that it's policy that you want everything compliance measured. The key, I think, part of this in your discussions and the designing of target operating model is understanding where the law of diminishing returns sits. We come across a lot of organisations trying to get the perfect data, and they spend a lot of time doing that, whilst in the meantime they sort of get audited in other vendors perhaps that they should have prioritised. So understanding what that looks like and how you're going to mitigate overall a business prioritised view of risk management is really important. But again, sitting compliance reporting as a trustworthy data deliverable is absolutely vital to that tier deliverable. Next bit is consumption reporting, reporting of cloud consumption across an IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. How do I do that? What does that mean? What are my objectives? So for some vendors, and you might take Office 365 as a great example, I want to make sure I understand my consumption against persona need, user need. Do I properly understand what my user breakdown is, and am I measuring the consumption of SaaS services against that consumption? Equally, in my wider cloud environments, Azure or AWS to name a couple, do I truly understand what I am consuming, and how, and consequently the process that we followed to get to that level of consumption. Do we have demand management, for instance? How am I validating? What is that data for? So again, trustworthy data. Is that consumption data delivering any kind of outcome or any kind of validation to deliver an outcome? So lifecycle, asset lifecycle process. This is the process that supports the asset lifecycle, be it perpetual licensing and software and on-premise or cloud service. Have I got the right full breadth of lifecycle defined? gave those 6 examples. What are the processes we're going to put in place to deliver that? What are the outcomes that's going to achieve? How does that add value to my other peers and leadership across the organisation? So what does that look like? And what does that process map look like? What's our priorities implementing that process map? And do I also need to provide a number of support services, such as a licensing type service desk, to ensure that where people can't follow a process because they simply don't know, they have somewhere to go to get some questions answered. Contract and maintenance renewal support, again, a part of Lifecycle. So we look at contract maintenance renewal as part of a life cycle of a contract. Do I have the ability to, do I know what I've got? Is it in one place? Do I know what that profile is? Do I know who owns it? Do I have the data to validate that maintenance renewal is required? How do I know I'm driving best value? All of these things need to be delivered in terms of a comprehensive contract and maintenance renewal capability. What does that look like in terms of a service, not just to say procuring and sourcing, but to perhaps to other budget owners in lines of business or even IT where procurement don't, or category management don't cover perhaps the vendors that they actually consume in those areas. And software optimization. So what is the software I'm optimizing? Do I have the means to do that? So how am I going to get the right skills and expertise, the resources to reharvest, to optimize licensing models, to assess what my cloud migration optimization looks like, and any other kind of technical stroke operational optimizations you may want to perform with either software or cloud services. Sourcing support stroke advisory services. So this is where in tier 3, where the target operating model needs to provide the means of providing the right level of advisory support for people who are sourcing, be it category procurement or even be it, line of business budget owners or IT owners. And this is about the framework of best practice, the framework of logical approaches to buying and contracting new software, where of course a lot of the ownership may sit already in your organisation to things like procure to pay process, but where clearly licensing or cloud expertise needs to drive value and help better assess the alignment of the purchase to strategic or business needs. And being able to have that alignment of sourcing support stroke advisory services makes SLM far more valuable and more tangible to perhaps those stakeholders outside of core procurement and sourcing, where they need some added assistance in that process, especially where they're not contract experts or licensing experts themselves. Vendor strategy. So, I'm going to go on a journey with a vendor. It could be a 10 or 15 year relationship, depending on the technology or platform we're looking to implement. Do I understand what I'm getting myself into? Do I have the requisite commercial contractual expertise on that vendor to actually go and have a meaningful conversation? Do I understand what my risks of growth are? Am I going to contract this with a degree of agility to my business needs? And how am I going to negotiate that? So these tend to be much more vendor-driven discussions rather than procurement sourcing framework discussions. It's that vendor to deliver this outcome for our business for this period of time using this technology. This is how it's got to be agile. This is how it's got to deliver value. How am I going to go and do that? And do I have the right people to do it? And last of all, we're talking about portfolio management. So this is the alignment of specific products and services that you buy from those vendors to business use cases, well-defined, well-documented, to ensure you're buying the right product or service at the right level to meet the business need. Why this is so important is because where you're going more into an all-in scenario with certain vendors on cloud services, you have to be able to measure the value returned by those investments. Because if you can't, how are you going to demonstrate your ability to derive better commercial outcomes when it comes to a value discussion, the contractual renewal? And how are you going to hold the vendor accountable to what they've sold you, what they've told you need versus the value you get out of it. The other aspect of portfolio management is getting better accountability from those parts of the organisation who tell you they want something, they want you to buy something because they need it. It's great. How are you going to be accountable for the value that delivers, and how are you going to demonstrate there is a business case to do that? So this all sits in the portfolio management area. So that's an example of target operating model. What we see is those three tiers aligned to ISO standard. If you like, if you take a top-down view, tier 3 optimization absolutely looks at the kind of sourcing procurement standpoint of how do I contract for something and drive the value. Tier 2 is about how I make best use of that investment in its life cycle. Tier 1 is, do I have the trustworthy data to make meaningful management decisions? That's how we've demonstrated a target operating model aligned to the ISO standard, and we encourage you to use all parts of it. The blueprint goes into a bit more detail on that aspect. Please do use it. So just to complete this then, let's look at stage 4. So stage 4 is about transformation. Transformation here is regarding the approach that we recommend customers take to delivering the outcome around SLM that they're looking to achieve. And it's just a simple 3-step process. It's really, again, an aid memoir for you, just to think about how am I going to, the logical approach to the implementation of SLM transformation, how am I going to provide continual measurement and performance analysis of that approach so that the business knows that we are delivering on our promises of those outcomes and strategic outcomes that we've identified. We split into 3 areas: enable, control, and optimize. And importantly, again, those people involved in that are those people involved in the delivery of SLM, I guess, directly. Time frame for this, I think 2 to 4 hours. Depends how you need to integrate that program approach with your peers. Who needs to be part of that discussion. Clearly, that could take a lot longer. And the output really, again, is your high-level transformation plan. And this, don't forget, is really kind of pre-business case, pre-validation. But it's to say, when are we going to do something? What's the priority behind it? How do we know it's delivered value? The blueprint itself talks about a 3-step approach of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. There's some example content under there for each of those. They may or may not align to what you want to do, but it gives you an idea of perhaps how you might approach it. One thing to say is it's shown in a fairly linear approach here. It is absolutely not linear. And we may actually update this in a future edition of the blueprint. Some of these streams will be clearly concurrent as they go through each of the phases, driven by business priority. But in a simplistic view, that's how it looks. And you'll notice on the left-hand side there, we've dialed into capability, deliverable, and outcome. And just to finish, stage 5. So stage 5 is writing the business case, again, aligned to the ISO of trustworthy data lifecycle optimization. Really underpins really why we've taken this approach is because those 3 sets of deliverable outcomes need to have a financial case around them, and so that people understand the significance or role of each of them. Importantly, on trustworthy data lifecycle optimization, what we try and do is actually make sure that there is a financial case behind it. Now, obviously, we've talked in the first stage about both commercial, operational, and technical outcomes. The business case tends to be commercially focused. You, of course, can weave in operational technical outcomes as part of that. But certainly getting it to stand up for a lot of organisations, it's got to pass the commercial test. So we've just tried to give you a flavour of what those 3 areas are commercially in the blueprint. Clearly, we can help you just put some more context around that if you need to, as part of your approach to that. So that really covers the blueprint. We are always on hand with our customers to help them. We've had brilliant feedback so far on this, I must tell you. And we want our relationship with our customers to take some of the great content that we think we can give you, to go off and use that and use us where you feel that you need some external support in your journey. If you have any questions or feedback on the blueprint, absolutely gratefully received. We'll give you a link on our website, which you will see on here. In fact, I'll just go back one slide, and just so you can see the link. In fact, it's probably not very clear, but it's www.livingstone-tech.com/SLM-blueprint. So go to that link, download it, and any feedback you have, please leave it on the website there. As I said, we want to continue our journey with our customers, helping you make this real and making this deliver outcomes for your organisation is clearly what we care about. We're always evolving our approach to delivering this on our services and our technology that supports it, and we want to see you guys be successful. So please reach out to us if you've got any questions, and do reach out to the team here at Livingstone if you want any further discussions or any more tailored walkthroughs of this for your organisation. So in the meantime, I want to thank you for your time. Really appreciate the attention you've given this webinar today, and I look forward to hopefully having some more direct conversations about your journey in SLM and the blueprint in the future. So at that point, I'll say goodbye, and hopefully we will